So let's talk about case conceptualization. So in every treatment model, whatever model you have, one of the common features is there's a way to conceptualize a client's problem and conceptualize a way through that problem. And CBT is no different than that. It has a way of conceptualizing a client's problem. Now, one of the things that's unique about the conceptualization in terms of CBT, or it's not hugely unique, but it's this sort of openness to how you're putting together your framework of how you look at the person's issues. And so you're always in discussion with your client around the case conceptualization. It's also sort of a function of how you write assessments. Most agencies, when you're involved with clients, you do assessments on clients, and you'll write that up. And there'll usually be a portion where you conceptualize the client's issues. And depending on your theoretical orientation, this is kind of where you kind of write that in. So we want to go talk about sort of the bigger picture of beliefs. Where do beliefs come from? So if you think of yourself and some of the things that you hold strongly, where do your beliefs come from? How have you come to believe what you believe? Your upbringing? Okay. Social learning. So kind of places you go and people you interact with and who pats you on the back for believing that and who punishes you for believing something else. Okay. 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 What are some strong beliefs that you have? So think of things that, what beliefs you have about yourself, right? What kind of person you are, what you're good at, how lovable you are, how likable you are, right? Where do those come from? So early life experiences, yeah. So probably all of you can think of key experiences that happened for you when you were young that kind of had a big impact on who you are. Is that true? And you kind of think, yeah, okay, this happened to me, and that had a big impact on who I am. Right? So most of us have, can think of that, and all of us have those events. Some events are big and dramatic, and some events are just sort of ongoing. Every day you came home from school and you had a conversation with somebody in your family, and it was along a certain vein, or you overheard Dad sort of yelling at the television when news items would come on, and that kind of stuck in your brain. I want to, you identified with that, or you said, whoa, I don't want to believe that, or you kind of rejected that. So a lot of things kind of happened to you that informed who you are and what you believe about yourself and what you believe about the world. And again, I think we can kind of apply this social work lens to this piece of CBT. We can look at the effect of culture, for example. Okay, so what culture have you been raised in? How has culture influenced what you believe? How has culture influenced the assumptions that you make about life? How has the interaction between your culture and colleagues that you have with other cultures or other groupings of people, and how has that interaction affected how you believe? Right? We can think about gender. Right? Most of you are women in this room. What kinds of things were you taught about women when you were young? What kinds of things have you adopted to say this is true about women? Or what kind of role models have you admired? And how has that changed your belief about yourself as a woman? And so all of these things have a significant effect on our core beliefs. These are our beliefs that are sort of very deep and embedded in us, and we tend to view them as absolute truths, right? Are people trustworthy, right? Okay, you probably have a belief about that, and it's probably quite a strong belief, and you're probably not that open to somebody challenging you on that belief. You probably have very strong beliefs about who you are, what kind of person you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, right? And it's probably hard to kind of challenge you on that. And so we have these sort of deep-seated core beliefs that are often developed in early childhood. Now, it doesn't have to be early childhood, particularly in the cases of trauma or fairly dramatic events. Individuals one of the things that's so hard about trauma is that you have an experience of something in your life that shakes you at the foundations. So, for example, if we go back to our driving example, so you're driving back and forth from Vernon for some reason, coming to school, and you say you do that, a couple times a week, and you view yourself as a good driver, that the world is safe. Then all of a sudden you have a terrible accident, and it's a terrible thing, and maybe people die, and it just shakes you at the roots of your sense of who you are, and suddenly you come to believe that the world is not a safe place, that you're not a good driver, that you're not competent, and dangerous things can happen to you just out of the blue. And so people can have very major shifts in their core beliefs outside of just sort of early childhood events. Genetic predispositions seem to play a role kind of in this type of thing. Generally, core beliefs are positive in a healthy, functioning individual. But what happens is when we get stressed, then kind of a negative side tends to come out. So you all probably started school and you were very positive about your ability to do school. And then suddenly, you're nearing the end of term and you're overwhelmed by assignments, and you're having thoughts about, I'm not going to get this done. And your core beliefs kind of start shifting a bit. Maybe I'm not such a good student. Maybe I'm not as capable as I thought. And so positive core beliefs are usually matched with a negative core belief. And during times of stress and pressure, it can start to kind of flip around. And certainly in cases of individuals who are experiencing depression, who have episodes of depression, this is what's happening. Their negative core beliefs are starting to emerge and taking over the picture. Negative core beliefs don't necessarily cause depression, and all of you who've done the mental health class know that we never want to say there's just one cause to depression. But one of the characteristics of people when they become depressed is their negative core beliefs start to emerge. And so it becomes an area of clinical concern when that happens. Now here's some core beliefs that are common in depression. So believing that I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do about a situation. It's hopeless. I am a victim in a terrible situation. And so sometimes clients have this as a theme in their core beliefs. Beliefs about your value as an individual, and believing that I'm a worthless individual. I have no value. I would be better off dead. My children would be better off if they didn't have such a bad parent as me. Right? This belief that I'm of little value. Tied to that is often a belief about unlovability. People don't like me, and people shouldn't like me. I'm a bad person. I'm not lovable. I'm not capable of being loved. I'm not deserving of being loved. And so these are very sort of distressing, negative beliefs to have, but they tend to be kind of the core beliefs that emerge for a person during a period of depression. Okay? So as you can imagine, those core beliefs are quite painful. Right? We use the information processing model as a way of sort of explaining why core beliefs continue on, even in the face of contradictory evidence. Right? So if I view myself as I'm terrible at math, I can probably identify a whole lot of experiences where I've done poorly at math. And so I adopt those as evidence to support my core belief. Now, if for some reason I do well on a math test, right, I have evidence that suggests maybe I'm not as bad at math as I thought I was. Maybe I still remember the value of pi. Right? Maybe I'm not, there are sort of experiences out there that would actually discount my belief that I'm terrible at math. But I ignore those. Right? It's kind of selective hearing. I only listen to the experiences that incorporate my core belief. And so thus a negative core belief can be perpetuated over a long period of time in spite of evidence to the contrary, in spite of you as the clinician being able to see reasons why that belief might not be valid. The client ignores the evidence for that. And so the core belief is maintained over a long period of time. Now, core beliefs are quite painful. And so in order to cope with the pain of core beliefs, or negative core beliefs, is we come up with intermediate beliefs. Doesn't sound like a very creative term, but intermediate beliefs, which are really sort of attitudes and rules and assumptions about the world. So in order to cope with something painful like I'm not a lovable person, I'm going to come up with sort of rules about how to live life. So I'm going to attend a class, but nobody's going to like me, so I just won't bother associating with people. I won't try and make friends. So my negative belief, or my negative core belief, leads to a way of coping and looking at specific situations. Now, often we look at these in terms of assumptions, or what we call conditional assumptions, which tend to be these if-then statements. So if I let people in the class get to know who I am, they'll realize I'm a horrible person. So we then say, so I won't let people get to know me. That way, nobody's going to judge me. All right. And so the core belief leads to assumptions about the world. And these become kind of the rules. So I won't let people get to know me. I won't speak up in class. Right? And so we develop these rules in order to cope with the pain of the core belief. So core beliefs, conditional assumptions can be both in the positive or negative. So if I have my act together, people will like me. If I do something embarrassing, people will think that I'm a goof. Right? So it can be stated kind of both in a positive or a negative kind of way. And rules are kind of the abbreviated versions of this. You know, don't embarrass yourself. Don't do something stupid. Right? Oh, I like this one. Don't eat in front of others, or you'll slop your food and embarrass yourself. Right? My wife has a phrase, first date food. Right? This is not, she'll say, this is not first date food. Right? Meaning you don't want to go on a first date and eat this food because you might slop and then you'll look really stupid. Right? So, all right. So we have attitudes, rules, and assumptions. And then these in turn lead to coping strategies. Okay? So I think this is where the connection becomes really quite strong. Is that, so how am I going to cope in life? Right? What is my coping strategy? Right? And so my coping strategy might be I never speak up in class. Right? I'll be very quiet. Or maybe it'll be the opposite. I'll be the person who always talks in class. Right? Right? So one of the problems is that coping strategies may serve to perpetuate the problems that the individual has, right? So if you have social anxiety and your coping strategy is to not speak up in class, that will perpetuate your social anxiety. So here's a list of coping strategies from Judith Beck's book. So, trying to avoid negative emotions. I'm not going to talk about my feelings, right? Versus an over-display of high emotion for attention. Right? And so, you get kind of these pairs, trying to be perfect or purposely trying to appear helpless. Right? Right? And so we all have these, right? So just to summarize, so we have kind of early life experiences, which then lead to the creation of core beliefs, which lead to attitudes, rules, and assumptions. And then in turn leading to our coping strategies. Okay? Oh, I'm going to give you an example. I just thought I'd kind of share this with you. This is a book called Finding Gobi. Anybody heard of this book? Anybody like dogs? Right? So it's a story about a long-distance runner. He does these 7-day marathons, right? And in the desert, right? Can you imagine, 300 kilometers and stuff like that? Let's all line up and do that one, right? Anyways, on a run in the Gobi Desert, this little dog attached himself to him, and so the book is about kind of how he develops a relationship with this dog, and has to get this dog out of China. And so it's a nice read, and it's kind of, if you like dogs and that, it's a fun book. But what interested me about it is kind of the backstory. So this guy, the runner, He grew up in a fairly difficult situation. So his father died, I think, when he was about 8 or 10 years of age. And then a couple of days after his father died, his mother told him, well, that really wasn't your father. And so he had this sort of, horrid discovery that this man that he thought was his father really wasn't his father. His mother then went into a deep depression and remained depressed chronically after that. And so he was raised by a single parent who was very depressed. And so his sort of coping, and sort of in the neighborhood he was in, people knew that he was an illegitimate child, that there was something, mom had done something nasty here and this child had been born, and they wouldn't let other kids play with him because they thought he would be a bad influence. And of course, he responded by acting out a lot in school. He was getting into trouble a lot with school. He liked to challenge people in authority, so he'd be in fights with his teachers, and periodically being suspended. Home life was a mess because he had this very depressed mother, but he would also fight with her, and he was in a lot of conflict with her. Eventually, he just moved into the basement, and even before high school, he left home and lived in a hostel. And when he graduated from high school, you go up the front and you get your high school diploma, and the principal would be shaking everybody's hand and congratulating them and wishing them well in their careers and their futures. And the principal came to him, and the principal said, "We'll see you in prison." Right? So not a very nice thing to say, right? But a lot of people were saying things like this to him, and he was very sort of good at sports. So you can see how that would sort of influence his core beliefs about himself. Right, and about the world. So the world is kind of a nasty place for him, right? People are always critical of you. People aren't accepting of you. And I'm kind of a failure as a person. So he's kind of got this very sort of negative core belief. His way of coping is to come out with his teeth bared, right? He did a lot of fighting with people. And he talks about, he was very good at athletics. And so he talks about playing hockey. So as an adult, he joined kind of hockey teams and stuff like that. And he was very good at it. And of course, everybody else was really bad at it. And so he'd be very upset with his teammates, and he would be frequently going into rages, yelling and screaming at them. And so he had developed a coping strategy of, being the first to attack. And of course, so in order to sort of deal with that, he adopted sports that were individual sports. So running was a good sport for him because there was no teammate to get mad at. So all of this then kind of sets the backdrop then for things like automatic thoughts. So when he would get into a race, and so you can imagine doing 6 days of marathon running, right? And some of you are probably athletes and you like sports. And you know this, you kind of get exhausted, you get physically tired, and then the negative thoughts would come in, and all these voices of, you can't do this, you're no good at this, right? And there were races that right in the middle of the race, he'd just quit. He'd just stop. Even though he was physically capable of doing it, his self-talk talked him out of continuing on in the race. And so there's this kind of dialogue that goes on in the backstory of the book about his self-talk and his battles with the self-talk in order to continue on in the race. And the good piece of the story is the dog helps him heal at an emotional level. So anyway, so I just like it. It's sort of an example of kind of a way to sort of case conceptualize a situation. So he has childhood experiences that lead to a core belief, rules that he lives by, coping strategies that he develops, and these in turn inform the automatic thoughts that he has. So if we take sort of an example here, so early life experiences such as a traumatic childhood can affect your core belief system, such as the world is dangerous, right? So I've had bad experiences with my parent. My parents didn't treat me well, and I came to the conclusion that the world is dangerous. So then that could lead to sort of rules and conditional assumptions. If I let my guard down, I will get hurt, which then can lead to coping strategies such as, I just don't trust people, right? You get the picture? Get kind of how this works? Okay. All right. So all these kind of, this sort of conceptualization structure then lays sort of the groundwork for situational events, automatic thoughts, and our emotional, physical, and behavioral responses to that, right? So this basically formulates our case conceptualization. Okay, all these pieces.